Before the doctors, before the test results, before the word hearing loss was ever spoken. There was just sound, and Emery soaked it in like sunlight. She loved the small sounds best: the clink of her dad's spoon stirring cocoa, the whistle of their old kettle on the stove, the scratchy hiss of vinyl when they played old records on Sundays. But her favorite was their Saturday morning ritual. Her dad would put on music, anything with soul and rhythm, and they'd dance barefoot in the kitchen, pancakes sizzling on the griddle, eggs forgotten, as they twirled in their pajamas, laughing, offbeat and unbothered. He'd sing along, off key, and she'd yell over the music, "Dad, you're ruining it." But secretly, she loved that voice, not because it was perfect, but because it was his. And every night before bed, he'd peek through her doorway and whisper, "Good night, Peanut. You're the best part of my day." She never imagined there would come a time when she couldn't hear those words, or when the sound of music would become memory instead of melody. But silence doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it sneaks in softly, like a song fading mid-verse. She was only 13 when the doctor said it. "You're going to lose your hearing, slowly, permanently." Most kids would have cried, screamed, begged for another answer. But Emery didn't do any of that. She just went home, sat on her bed, picked up her dad's old recorder, and hit record, not on herself, not on the world, but on him. Because if she couldn't stop the silence from coming, she'd do the next best thing: capture the one sound she never wanted to forget. Her father's voice, not just his words, but the warmth, the cadence, the way he said, "Good night, Peanut," like it was a song made just for her. She knew every syllable would one day fade, but if she moved fast enough, if she listened closely enough, she could hold on to him, not just in memory, but in something real, something that would last even when her ears no longer could. What started as a quiet ritual between a father and daughter would one day grow into something far bigger and far louder than either of them ever imagined. Emery Park was always drawn to sound, not noise, sound, the subtle kind: rain on the roof, pages turning, the way her father's voice dropped when he told her something serious. She didn't talk much as a kid, didn't need to, because she had him. Her dad, Matthew, was her world's narrator. He made sense of things, big things like grief, little things like why birds fly in V formations. He never raised his voice, but when he spoke, people leaned in. And Emery, she lived for that voice. It wasn't just sound, it was security. It was home. Their bedtime routine was sacred. A different story every night, some made up on the spot, featuring dragons who loved gardening or rabbits who ran detective agencies. He even gave her a nickname she couldn't explain but adored: Peanut. And every night, without fail, he'd say, "Good night, Peanut. You're the best part of my day." She never thought about what it meant to hear that, until the day she almost couldn't. It started subtly: a missed doorbell, not hearing her name called from downstairs, needing to sit closer to the TV. At first, her dad joked that she was just tuning the world out like a teenager. But then came the real signs: the audiologist visits, the cold, clinical words: progressive sensorineural hearing loss. Rare, genetic, irreversible. It wouldn't be gone overnight, but one day, it would be. She was 13, and for the first time in her life, Emery was afraid of silence. Not just silence from the world, but from him, from the one voice that made her feel whole. She didn't cry in the car, didn't say much, But that night, when her dad came in to say goodnight, she looked up and asked, "If I start recording you, would that be okay?" He paused, confused at first, then nodded. "Only if I can record you back." And just like that, a quiet countdown began, not to silence, but to preservation, to memory, to meaning. Because while Emery couldn't stop her hearing from slipping away, she could make sure his voice never did. Matthew Park wasn't a man who cried easily. He believed in showing up, in being steady, in solving what could be solved, and holding space for what couldn't. But when the diagnosis came, he didn't have a fix, and that haunted him more than he let on. At night, after Emery fell asleep, he'd sit in the hallway outside her room, just listening to the quiet, to the ticking clock, to the absence of the world he used to share with her. One evening, when he thought no one was watching, he recorded something on her device while she was out of the room. Just a short clip, just in case. "Peanut, I don't know how to prepare you for silence, but I promise I'll never let you feel alone in it. Even if you can't hear me, I'll always be saying your name." He never told her about that recording. He wasn't sure she'd ever need it, but what he could do was give her everything else: his voice, his memories, his time, his presence. He started speaking more intentionally, pausing less, adding color to his words, describing things more fully, because if this was the last season of sound they'd share, he was going to make it unforgettable. As Emery's hearing declined, her recordings grew. But not just of her father. She began recording everything that mattered. Her grandmother humming lullabies from her childhood, the sound of her best friend laughing during sleepovers, the crickets outside her window on summer nights. Soon her project wasn't just about memory, it became a mission. She gave it a name: the Sound Library. At first it lived on a shared drive, then a blog, then a growing online archive where people from around the world, people who were deaf, going deaf, or simply sentimental, could upload the voices they never wanted to lose. A mother singing to her newborn, a voicemail from a grandfather who had passed, a dog's bark, a lover's whisper. Every sound became sacred. And Emery, she wasn't just a girl preserving sound. She was helping others remember what they feared forgetting most. In preserving her father's voice, she had unlocked something universal: the truth that some sounds aren't just sound, they're soul, they're story. They're the glue between who we are and who we love. There was one recording she never shared, not online, not even with her closest friends. It was just for her. A late autumn afternoon, the year she turned 15. Her dad had come home from work early. He didn't say why, just picked up his guitar, an old worn thing with a crack down the neck, and asked if she wanted to sit on the porch. She was tired that day. Her ears were ringing. The world felt far away. But she nodded. He strummed softly, and then he sang a song he used to play when she was little, something about stardust and morning light and finding your way home. His voice cracked a little, the wind picked up, but she heard it all, and she pressed record, not because it was perfect, but because it wasn't. Because it was raw, because it was real, because she didn't know if she'd ever hear it again. Years later, when her hearing was nearly gone, she played it back one night. She couldn't hear the full melody anymore, but she could feel it in her chest, in her bones, in her memory. And that was enough. Because love, like sound, doesn't disappear. It just changes frequency. And if you listen with the right parts of yourself, you can always find your way back to it. At first, it was just for her. One voice, one bond, one daughter holding on. But word began to spread, quietly, organically, one shared link, one forwarded message, one person whispering, "You should talk to Emery." So she opened the door wider, turned her private archive into a public toolkit, free, accessible, no login, no paywall, just love in digital form. She called it the Voice Shelf, a simple place where people could upload the voices they were afraid to forget, record new ones before it was too late, create message banks for kids, partners, future selves. One family used it to preserve bedtime stories from a grandparent with early onset Alzheimer's. A soldier recorded messages for his newborn before deployment. A teacher saved goodbye letters in audio for a class of deaf students using tactile transcription. Hospice workers began handing it out like a parting gift. Audiologists used it as a healing tool. ASL interpreters recommended it for bridging hearing families with deaf children. Emery even got a message from a woman in South Korea. "I lost my mom's voice when I was 14. Now, my daughter will never lose mine." Emery read every message, and every time she did, she imagined her dad sitting beside her, saying what he always said when she doubted herself. "You don't need to speak loudly to change the world. You just have to say the right thing at the right time and let it echo." The house looks different now. New curtains, fewer toys, more stillness. But the porch swing still creaks the same way. And Emery still knows exactly which floorboard squeaks in the hallway. She comes back every year, on the same day, not his birthday, not her diagnosis date, just the day he first said, "Good night, Peanut." Her hearing is nearly gone, but her world is louder than ever, because she built it that way. Today she sits beside him, older, grayer, but still him. She pulls out a new recorder. Upgrades may have come and gone, but the ritual is the same. He smiles. "Still got tape left?" She shakes her head. "Always." And for the first time in years, she presses record, not because she's afraid anymore, but because she's grateful. He leans closer and whispers into the mic, "Good night, Peanut. You're still the best part of my day." Emery closes her eyes, and for a moment, the world is perfectly still, not silent, not gone, just held. She started with the basics. Her dad reading a story, soft, slow, the way he always had. But now, every syllable felt sacred. She wasn't just listening, she was keeping. The next night, she asked him to tell her how he and Mom met, then how to change a flat tire, then how to cook rice without it sticking. It became their new ritual, not just bedtime stories, but life lessons, snapshots of his soul. He'd sit in the kitchen while Emery sat across from him, voice recorder in hand. Sometimes he'd talk. Other times, he'd hum songs from his childhood, even the ones he barely remembered. He recorded himself waking her up in the morning, leaving her messages when she was at school, whispering, "You've got this," before every big test. And then, one night, he did something she didn't expect. He handed her a notebook, dozens of pages handwritten, on the cover, "Things I want you to hear even if you can't." Inside were moments, fragments, little scripts. "Hey, Peanut, don't forget to breathe before your first job interview. Today's a hard day. That's okay, but it's not a forever day. If you ever wonder if I'd be proud of you, stop. I already am." He'd written them all with no timeline in mind, just trust. That one day she'd need them. That one day when her world went quiet. His voice could still guide her through. That night, Emery didn't cry. She laughed, through tears. And then, for the first time, she turned the mic on herself. "Hi, future me," she whispered. "You're still you, and he's still here. Let's keep going." The recorder became part of her routine, not just something she used, but something she relied on. While other teens were scrolling through playlists, Emery was building a library of moments, of memories, of meaning. And her dad, he started taking it seriously too. Every Sunday afternoon, he'd sit at the kitchen table with a mug of tea and say, "Okay, what do you want to hear today?" Some days it was silly. "Tell me your worst haircut story. Do you believe in aliens?" Other days it was heavier. "What were you most afraid of as a kid? What was the hardest thing you forgave someone for?" And always, he answered like she was already listening in the future, like he was reaching forward in time, so that even when her ears stopped working, his love would still get through. She started categorizing the recordings, tagging them by topic, by tone. Comfort, motivation, dad jokes, late night talks. She learned how to clean audio, remove static, even designed a color-coded playback system to track what she might need most on hard days. And as her hearing declined, her skills grew sharper. So did her courage. She began teaching herself ASL, started wearing her hearing aids more confidently, stopped pretending she could hear everything, and started being honest when she couldn't. Because the more she captured her father's voice, the more she understood her own. She wasn't just preserving the sound, she was preserving the relationship, the part of love that doesn't vanish when the volume drops. It just changes frequency, and somehow that made the silence less frightening. She no longer felt like time was running out because she had proof. Not everything beautiful disappears. Some of it you get to carry forward. It didn't happen all at once. There were good days, almost normal days, days when the world still whispered if she leaned in close enough. But then there was that day. She woke up and something was missing. The rustle of sheets, the dog scratching at the door, her father humming in the kitchen like he did every morning, gone. She blinked, sat up, held her breath. But nothing came. It wasn't quiet. It was empty. The last trace of sound had slipped away in her sleep, and in its place, a deep, sudden grief, like losing someone twice. She made it down the stairs, saw her dad standing there, smiling, holding a mug of tea like everything was normal. He said something. She didn't know what, just the shape of his mouth moving gently, and that was it. Confirmation. It was over. She didn't cry in front of him, just nodded, took the tea and went back upstairs. Then she pulled out the little device, the one she'd practiced with, built for this very moment. She slipped on the tactile headset, let the vibration pads rest against her collarbones and wrists, and queued up the file labeled, "If Today's the Day." It was her father's voice, clear, calm, present. "Hey, Peanut, if this is the first day without sound, then let me say this loud enough for your whole heart to feel. You've never needed ears to be loved, and you've never needed noise to be extraordinary. I'm right here. I always will be." She sank to the floor, pressing her hand to the speaker on her chest. Not to hear it, but to feel it. And in that moment, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full. She didn't stop recording after that. She just changed how she listened. She built a system for converting voice to pulse, tone to vibration, and emotion to sensation. And slowly she taught others to do the same. What started as a daughter trying to hold on to her father's voice became something bigger, much bigger. When Emery turned 22, she uploaded a few of the recordings, just a handful, to a quiet corner of the internet. No fanfare, no announcement, just a soft offering. She titled the page, Voices Worth Keeping, and within days, messages poured in. I didn't know how much I needed this. I lost my mom last year. I wish I'd thought to do what you did. Is there a way I can record something for my son before my hearing fades too? So she built more. She created templates, guides, starter questions, not technical, not polished, just human. She partnered with audiologists and grief counselors, started visiting schools for the deaf, helping students build their own emotional audio archives. Hospitals began using her framework for patients with terminal diagnoses, giving families a way to preserve voices, stories, laughter, not just for closure, but for continuity, for the child who couldn't remember their mother's laugh, for the partner who missed hearing, I love you in the way only one voice could say it, for the people who never got to say goodbye. Emery's quiet ritual became a global act of remembrance, a way to say you may be gone, but your voice, your presence, will still live here, right where I can feel it. And through it all, her father stayed close. He still recorded notes for her, though now she heard them through vibration and translation. He learned to sign, learned to hold longer hugs. And when someone asked him once how he felt about losing his daughter's ability to hear his voice, he smiled and said, She may not hear me with her ears anymore, but she's never stopped listening. We live in a world that often moves too fast to listen, but Emery learned something most people never do. That silence isn't the absence of love, it's just a different way of hearing it. Her recordings weren't just backups for the sound she was losing. They were bridges to her past, to her father, to herself. Because when we lose something, we don't just grieve the thing. We grieve the connection it gave us, the comfort, the familiarity, the feeling of being known. But Emery proved you can build new ways to hold on to that. You can keep someone's voice alive, even when the volume disappears. She didn't fight the silence, she shaped it, made it into a space that held memory, love, and presence in every pulse, every page, every quiet heartbeat of her library. So let me ask you this. If you knew the sound was fading, whose voice would you record? What words would you want to keep? What sound would you want your heart to remember, even when your ears no longer could? Comment below with the one voice you'd never want to lose. Share this story with someone who listens with more than just their ears. And if you believe that love can outlast silence, hit subscribe. Because here on Able in Every Way, we don't just tell stories about loss. We tell stories about how we keep what matters most, even in the quiet.